Namaste, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nikunj Trivedi, and I'm the president of the Coalition of Hindus of North America. And I have a distinct pleasure of welcoming Sri Francois Gautier, who is a very notable French journalist, writer, and activist. And here today, we're going to be talking about a bunch of things with him. So looking forward to the conversation. But first and foremost, before we get started, I would like to talk about his upcoming events, why we're here today. So he has been really working hard to build the Chhatrapati Shivaji Museum in India that is going to have a very different take on Indian history. And for that, he has a few events happening this coming weekend on December 12th, 2020, from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on December 13th, 2020, from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can actually register at tiny.cc, which is tiny.cc / talk by Francois Gautier. That's one word. Once again, tiny.cc / talk by Francois Gautier. You can check out more information about FACT, which is his organization, FACT, FACTUSA.org, F as in Francois, ACTUSA.org, and factmuseum.org. So both of them you can check out and get a lot of information. It's a 501c3 organization, so you'll have a tax ID and a chance to deduct your donations to the museum. So I highly urge all of you to donate generously. And of course, we're going to be talking about some of his books and some of the work that he's been doing. His new book that's coming out, it's available online at Garuda Publications, as well as in the Amazon India link. It's called An Entirely New History of India. So welcome, Francois Ji. As I was saying earlier, my first encounter with you, with your work, was back in my college days. One afternoon, I was sitting around and I found a link to your book, one of the first books, Rewriting Indian History. And I was so impressed by that book that I went and printed the entire copies from my school copier. And that was my first exposure, actually, to why would a French journalist, why would a French person really want to rewrite Indian history? And so that was really, really awesome. So I'm really happy that you are joining us today. So first, let's talk about maybe what's happening this coming weekend.
What's happening with?
This coming weekend. What is the program this weekend?
So, I'm a journalist, and I have covered extensively India, the political journalist, and my eyes were opened, particularly in Kashmir, when I witnessed the exodus of the Kashmiri Hindus in the late 90s. So I started studying Indian history and realized that it was not written as it happened. I mean, it's very simple to understand if you read Indian history that there is a certain bias in most of the way the events are reported. So I started studying Indian history. I did an exhibition on the Kashmiri Pandits in Delhi, which I opened in Delhi with Sri Ravi Shankar and Mr. L.K. Advani. And then I did an exhibition on Aurangzeb. I studied a lot Aurangzeb because it's very pivotal in the entire history of India. And of course, he's very admired by many historians. So I studied Aurangzeb, did an exhibition on him, did more exhibitions, started writing books on Indian history. As you mentioned, this was one of my earliest books, Rewriting Indian History. And then I had, at some point, my wife and I had many exhibitions. We used to inaugurate them with some VIP, many times with Sri Ravi Shankar, but different people, and then store them. And then we didn't know what to do with them. And Sri told me, I have a piece of land near the airport in Pune. Why don't you take it? So I started a small museum. I got a prize of journalism in 2005 that I got from Mr. Vajpayee, who was then the prime minister, and there was a check of 50,000 rupees. So I started FACT, a foundation FACT. The original name is Foundation Against Continuing Terrorism, because whether it is Aurangzeb, whether it is what happened to the Hindus of Kashmir, whether it is the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris, it's all about terrorism, about violence, what it does to people, how it damages the social fabric of a nation or of a people. So fact, we started with that money, and then on that piece of land, which was very bare, there was no water, only rocks. I started, planting trees and finding water, and I did a small temple first. There's a small temple at the entrance of the museum dedicated to Bharat Mata and to Shivaji Maharaj, because one, I'm a great admirer of Shivaji Maharaj. Two, I believe, in the Shakti, in the feminine energy that is very alive in India and that has influenced deeply South Asia, even countries like Pakistan or Bangladesh. And then slowly, it's a Seva museum. It's a donation museum. So as donations came, I started building one pavilion, put one exhibition. Now there are 18 pavilions and about 22 exhibitions. It's a free museum, only from word of mouth. It's been a difficult task, actually, but I do feel that it's more than my books. It's something that that will remain behind me. Something that my donation, my seva to India, my gratitude to India. So that museum is going on. As I said, it depends on donation. So during this weekend, we're going to try to raise some money. At the moment, we have started a series of exhibitions on the great heroines of India, the great women warriors of India. So there's Aliabai Holkar, there is Tarabai. Tarabai is being done in Udaipur. We already have 27 paintings done by a team of painters and a professor of Indian history, retired professor of the Udaipur University, specialist on this period of India. And then we have another exhibition on the great queen of the south, not very well known, called Rani Kittur Chennamma from Karnataka. So we have a series of exhibitions, and on Jijabai, also the mother of Shivaji Maharaj, because she was very pivotal, very essential in the shaping of the mind and the courage and the vision of Shivaji Maharaj. So for this, we have these events during this weekend where we hope to raise some money to fund these exhibitions and build more pavilions. That's the whole purpose.
Fantastic. So my question to you is, why this exhibit? Why not? There are so many exhibitions in India. So why should this exhibition be something unique?
Right. So, I've written many articles. I've been a journalist for 30 years. And of course, because of internet now, some of my articles are still going around. But an article has a short life. You write an article in a newspaper or on a website, it's got some impact. And then that impact lessens and goes away eventually. A book is a little longer, but now there are so many books today that the book shelf life is maybe 2 years maximum, unless you're the Bible or Harry Potter. Books have a tendency to fade away after some time. So the power of a book, because for me, what's important is how much a book can do. The education, and like my latest book, we'll talk about it later.
Yes.
And then the new history of India. It's got new elements, it's got a certain impact, so it has a certain power, But of course, the shelf life is not eternal. Now a museum stays. It'll stay behind me, hopefully. Hopefully it'll stay behind me. It's been a difficult task because, of course, Indian history is a very touchy subject. You do an exhibition on Goa. We have an exhibition on the Goa Inquisition. So, of course, Christians tend to get offended. But it's based on truth, I'm a person who stands for truth. I feel that truth is what's most important in life. As you perceive it, truth as it is. Truth is, eternal. There is no half truth. There is an absolute truth, and you try to get as close as possible to it. Now, of course, now the Goa Inquisition will shock some people. Aurangzeb, when we showed the Aurangzeb exhibition, there were many people who told me, why do you want to rake up the past? Why some people were, not aggressive. Other people were more aggressive. Why do you want to distort Indian history? So again, some people will be offended. I have an exhibition on the Hindu Holocaust, because probably the greatest genocide in the history of humanity is that of the Hindus, from the Hindu Kush till Mumbai 2011. So again, that may shock some people. So it's a very touchy subject. But once you have a museum, once it's established, it'll stay. It'll have a power which is lasting. Now school children are coming to my museum, and this makes really me happy, because what lacks in India is education about the great heroes, the great heroines of India, but also the great tragedies. Mr. Nehru,
Yes.
for good and bad reasons, chose to sweep under the carpet many of the great tragedies that have happened into Indian history, particularly the invasions from Alexander the Great, till Timur, until the Mughals, that were extremely bloody, extremely painful.
Yeah, and I agree with you because a museum has staying power. If you look at the Holocaust Museum in the US, the Black History Museum in the US, all of these museums really tell a story. They really tell the history, they touch people, right? And usually that people show up there, they can really, as a witness to history. Museum is like a witness to history, basically. So it's very, really important for a museum to be there. And I really admire your support, your work and hard work that you're putting in. Really happy to see that. And people like from my generation or even generations younger should really take a trip when they're in India to take a look at it. A couple of my friends have been there. I haven't been there, but they found it very helpful from like the information that you have put together there. So once again, I really want all the viewers and also people who are going to be viewing this a little later to really take a look at it and say, this is something that is very, very helpful in presenting the right version, the rewriting of the Indian history as you had put it together. So I think I would highly encourage everybody to go there, take a look at it. Now, let's kind of talk about maybe, let's flip over to your book a little bit. So a brief, for the people who are going to be reading the book, I just want to read a quick excerpt. A brief about the new book is Indian history needs to be re-examined and freed from colonial biases and error. Driven by Christian belief in a 6,000-year-old planet, British scholars and their Indian hires post-dated Indian history to fit into erroneous Western conceptions. For their own agendas, they manufacture theories such as that of an Aryan invasion, which we all know, and dismissed vast evidences such as the existence of the river Saraswati, which was considered mythical by the colonial historians, even though it was mentioned more than 50 times in the Vedas. The colonial gaze also erroneously represented events such as the invasion of India by Alexander the Great in the year 326 BCE, and fabricated myths such as the conversion of Emperor Ashoka to Buddhism, purposely due to remorse after the terrible Battle of Kalinga, when Ashoka was already a Buddhist at the time of the battle. This is something very new. Thus, this book rewrites Indian history based on new evidence, including scientific, linguistic, and genetic theories. It seeks to dismantle the cliches, to clarify the controversies, and to retrace as accurately as possible the most significant periods of Indian history. History much older than previously thought. So, very excited to see this book. Let's talk about that a little bit. Why this book, first of all?
As I said, Indian history from prehistory till today has been, badly written, badly informed, misinformed. There are many reasons. One is the British didn't want to show that India was had a much more ancient culture, medicine, astronomy, astrology, everything than they had. And the Christian, the Christian ethos is that now, of course, it has changed, but in the time that Max Muller and the first Sanskritists came into existence, they were all Christians, and they believed that the world started. I don't know the exact date, in 4,000 years before
BCE,
Christ.
yeah.
There was nothing before that. So Indian history is much older, 10 to 20,000 years older than that. So you have to start from the beginning, and you have to go into each controversy. Like for instance, I take the controversy that Indians didn't master the horses. I mean, this is not true. The skeletons of horses have been found. So Indians had horses much earlier than the historian said. Only thing, Indians prized elephants. They thought that elephants were a much more noble creature, and that it had more power. Of course, horses were faster, and when Prithviraj Chauhan fought Gori, it was quickly encircled. Then iron, for instance, that Indian didn't master irons. Actually, we found text, we found evidence that they had a great mastery of iron. If you see the iron pillar in the Qutub Minar play in Delhi, which actually was a very ancient Hindu and Buddhist temple, that iron never rusted. And even today, scientists do not understand how, after thousands of years, it's not rusted. And then you go to Alexander the Great, Of course, Alexander the Great is praised to heaven in most history books, but he had very tough times in India. It was not victorious as it's been depicted. Alexander the Great was wounded, badly wounded. He died from that wound. He entered fierce resistance. He was also a great admirer of India. He met many sadhus and was awed by the wisdom of the people in India. So this has to be told properly. Then you go to Ashoka. Mr. Nehru made of Ashoka a great hero because he's supposed to have converted to Buddhism after the Battle of Ashoka of Kalinga, but actually, if you look at history, and it is there, it is not that anybody is inventing everything. Ashoka converted to Buddhism for political reasons before the Battle of Kalinga, because at that time there was Jainism, there was a sect of Jainism and Buddhism. There were two very important influences on the king and emperors, and they were in conflict. So to counterbalance the the lobby of the Jains, he converted to Buddhism, and he actually was a very cruel emperor. He was called Chand, Ashoka the Cruel, because he was extremely cruel. So, the entire Indian history needs to be rewritten. Then you go to, of course, the Mughals, Mr. Aurangzeb, who has been praised to heaven by most historians, even recently by Audrey Turchke. He was actually a monster. He was actually a monster, not only to Hindus, but also to his own family. He imprisoned his father, he imprisoned his son, he poisoned his father, he beheaded his brother. He was an extremely cruel man, and he has to be depicted as he was according to his own records, because Aurangzeb left a lot of records. He was a very meticulous emperor, and he lived very old. So he lived till 80, which was very old for that time. And he was very meticulous. Every order he had it written in Farsi and had the emperors still, and they're preserved. They're still there in the archives in Bikaner and in Hyderabad, and we got hold of them. So if you want to depict Aurangzeb, you depict him according to his own record. You don't have to put any comments. So Aurangzeb, and then you go forward to you can go to what is called the First Independence War or the Great Mutiny. Actually, it was a mutiny mostly to reinstall the Mughal throne. The last Mughal king was alive and was in Delhi, was reinstalled by the mutineers, and so it was an extremely bloody, extremely violent mutiny for good and bad reasons. But one has to put it into perspective. The ultimate purpose was to reinstall the Mughal empire, which was, according to me, or if I was an Indian, I would say, this might not be the rightful thing to do. Independence means independence. And then the actual independence was started much before Mahatma Gandhi. You had people like Sri Aurobindo or Tilak, who were foreigners of independence, who actually in the early 20th century, in the 1900s, started asking the British to leave by force, if necessary, in the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita. Force was accepted because the purpose was good. It was dharmic. It was a good purpose to get freedom for India, to get rid of these people who had bled India dry. So this is how I try to rewrite Indian history, but with facts, with documents, with facts, with linguistic discoveries, archaeological discovery, genetic discovery. There are many genetic discoveries now that show that Indians have the same genes. They're not some people from the West, Aryans, who came from Russia, wherever, and imposed the Sanskrit, the Hindu religion, the caste,
the Brahmanical Aryan religion. That's
yeah. So
all kinds of words.
It's completely false, and now it is proved even genetically. So this had to be said, and this is what I did in my book.
Excellent. No, so I'm looking forward to it. So you're talking about authentic sources, original sources. So people cannot just easily dismiss it and say, oh, this is some kind of like right-wing controversial book or something like that. You're using original sources, so people cannot question that. So I'm really happy to hear about that. Now, I would say, how are you planning to kind of talk about this book once it is out? Now that it's, what about like tours? Are you having conversations, touring, things like that? How can people get more involved in that on the book process? And then we'll talk about the museum again in a bit.
You see, this book is important, but what's more important is that education is changing in India. That the curriculums of schools, start with not only proper Indian history, but teaching children to be proud to be Indians, whether they are, Christian or Hindus or Muslim. I'm French, and I was taught from my childhood that they were great warriors. They were Napoleon, they were Vercingetorix, they were great poets, they were great writers, they were great heroines. So I grew up being proud to be French. But whether in India, children are given such a westernized education that they have no roots in their own culture. They don't know that some of the greatest philosophers were Indians long ago, whether they were Buddhist philosophers, whether they're Sufi, whether they were Hindus, and that that Indian mathematicians had done what it took another 10 centuries for Western mathematicians to come to. I know a French astronomer from the 19th century who said, that Indians knew the distance from the moon to the earth long before us. That there were, people like Kalidasa who were on par with Homer, on par with Shakespeare. Even translated from the Sanskrit, Kalidasa is an extraordinary poet, world-class poet who's not even taught in school. You have Sri Aurobindo, a modern philosopher, one of the greatest philosophers ever, who's not taught even in philosophy curriculums. So, Indian children they have no pride to be Indians, and it creates a huge problem for India. And the more the Indian government waits to to introduce a proper Indian curriculum, the more it will be difficult, the more there will be resistance. So I think this is more important. And my museum is, actually a cry to the Indian government to say, you got to change the Indian education. So it's a British education that, Mr. Nehru just took over without, caring to adapt it to the Indian psyche, which is very ancient and very different. So it's extremely important for the future of India that Indian history is taught as it happened, and that, okay, of course, there were great tragedies, but on the whole, it was an extraordinary, saga of great people, of great sages, of great warriors. So on the whole, you feel proud. You feel, it's great to be Indian. That's what, when I came to India, I felt, well, it's great to live in this country. But I don't think many Indians have this thing. Oh, it's great to be Indian. Actually, there are many Indians who run down their own culture, their own spirituality, because they have no clue. They've just been taught, that everything the West does is great. Everything that is in the West is great. But that is not a fact. The West is struggling now at the moment and before to find answers that India has. There are, in this country, answers to who I am, what happened when I die, what is karma, what is dharma, what is consciousness, that the world is looking for, and which are here in India, but that Indians themselves ignore.
Yeah, and that happens so much, and it's unbelievable. I mean, I agree. Like, I think, I've grown up in India until I was 15, and I can tell you that if I stayed any longer, I would have become a self-hating Hindu, where you basically feel that your culture and your tradition has nothing good to offer, right? And that's why you look to the West or look to outside of India and see, okay, there's nothing good here. Why don't I just leave from here? It's all caste, corruption, all kinds of violence, and all this stuff, and the media doesn't help. So I'm glad that your book is coming out. So let's maybe talk about the museum a little bit again. First of all, are you having any other events? So this December 12th, 13th event that's happening this weekend, and once again, that event, I encourage everybody to attend. They can RSVP. I'm going to give the link in a bit. But let's talk about that. Again, any other events coming up for you besides this coming weekend?
Well, I keep doing webinars because now everything is about webinar online conversation. Yeah. So, but this event is important because we have come to a point in the museum where, especially with this coronavirus, with this COVID, there has been a freeze on many things. But I felt that I still have a few good years in front of me where I have the energy, the enthusiasm to travel a lot, to meet people, to start exhibition, to fight, all the kind of problems that I'm meeting in that museum, because I'm facing many problems. And one of them, of course, is funds. Is that the money that I need, I'm not getting it because people are very generous, but they give in small amounts, which is not enough to create the state-of-art museum that I would like to create. So I do it, organically, which is fine. but so because of COVID, I have decided that I should go on, I should carry on. So I have started exhibitions, and at the moment we are, a little short of funds. It's a little crunch because people have less money, people are in trouble financially. So these two events are important to us, and I'm grateful to the FACT USA team, which have been working very hard and which is working very hard to make it a success. Ultimately, I'm looking for 2-3 philanthropists, two big businessmen who have the heart and the intelligence to see that if there would be a world-class museum that shows Indian history as it happened, with state-of-the-art, digital, air conditioning that I have in mind, this will be something that will stay for centuries, because museums are temples of knowledge, and I need to build a temple of knowledge using the latest technology. Because today, if you have a screen and you want to see what's happened in 7th century, you just tap it, and you have, the gist of what happened in 17th century India. This is what I would like to do. But at the moment, I'm not getting this kind of money, so I'm keeping on doing it organically. And I know that my time is not wasted, and probably what I've done in my life, this will be the most valuable.
No, absolutely. And I can see some comments coming in, people who have either visited the museum, find it really credible and really enjoyable, the efforts and stuff like that to change the narrative. So really, really, I think everybody should be looking at that, donating generously. Again, just to reiterate for everybody, December 12th, online event, 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and December 13th, online event again at 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can check it out. If you want to reserve your spot, you'll get a Zoom link by registering at tiny.cc, tiny.cc/talk by Francois Gautier. You can also basically go to factusa.org, factusa.org, or Fact Museum, factmuseum.com. So all of this information will be available there. You can also, there's an email that was provided as well. So people who want to just send an email, factusa2018@gmail.com. That's factusa2018@gmail.com. So that's a little bit of information here. I think you can find the book on Amazon. From what somebody just posted a link here. It's on Amazon, Entirely New History of India. That's what the book's title is. So people can check it out as well. But yeah, how are things in India? How are you feeling nowadays with all the upheaval going on in India? What are some of your thoughts around that?
Yeah, there's a big farmer agitation now. I don't know how many of you know about what's happening is that for a long time, farmers, the government would buy farmers' products, producers, guarantee them a certain price, a certain ceiling price. And but this created many middlemen and corruption. It is once there are middlemen, corruption happens and bureaucracy happens. So Mr. Modi, rightly so, tried to remove this middleman and make it more an open market. So everything clamped together. There's been a lot of opposition to Mr. Modi from different sections of society. Different parties, and of course, they all clamped. They saw also an opportunity to target Mr. Modi indirectly. Whether the reform was not good or not is not important to them. So it's created quite a ruckus, especially in the north. But there was a ban yesterday, and even South India was affected. It's a big battle. It's a big struggle, and I'm a friend of India, and the struggle is on many fronts. With China also, of course, in my museum I have an exhibition on Tibet and Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, as well as the Tibetan genocide at the hand of Chinese, because China is a great problem for India. It's a great problem for India, and India needs the support of all the Indians who are abroad, especially the NRIs. India needs that support like the Chinese have the support of the Chinese American. There's been a great boost to China with the Chinese American, who had acquired a lot of knowledge, a lot of wealth also in America, and either went back to China and invested into China or helped China to boost its economy. This has not happened in India. We need Mr. Modi needs more support for the reforms that he has launched, because they are very important reforms, and they're meeting a lot of resistance. There's a lot of resistance, even in the West. I am very sad to see, as a historian, as a journalist, the misinformation that is propagated by journalists some of them are even in Delhi, Western correspondents, for instance, of the removal of Article 370. Nobody explained properly what it was that Kashmiris from the Valley of Kashmir could invest anywhere in India, buy houses, buy land, start businesses, and indeed they have cornered the souvenir trade. The souvenir trade in India, from Delhi to Pune to Madras to Pondicherry, is mostly in the hands of Kashmiri Muslims. Whereas Indians from the rest of India could not invest in Kashmir. They could not buy land, they could not start business, they could not buy houses. So Mr. Modi made something which was wrong, right? But it has been so misinterpreted, with a malice in the West, in my country, in France, where it's been portrayed as a persecution of Muslims. So it makes me a little sad, and I've been fighting for. My fight is manifold. It's not only about the Indian history; it's also about politics, about China, about the Indologists who are always misinterpreting, India, always targeting Hindus, targeting castes, targeting, rape, making India the land of rape, the land of caste, which is not true. Which is absolutely not true. Proportionately, there are much less rapes in India than there are in Sweden, or in Washington, for that matter. So it's been a long fight, but someone mentioned the word warrior. Of course, I'm a warrior, but I wish that Indians were more of warriors. Because if you take Hindus, there are 1.2, 1.3 billion Hindus all over the world, including in America. I don't know how many millions are there in America. So they're powerful lobby. They're well educated, they most of them are done well financially, but we don't see a lobby like the Jews have a powerful lobby. We don't see that. We see that Hindus are very disunited, including in the United States, into so many groups that fight each other. So we need to revive also the Kshatriya spirit in Indians, that you fight for your country, you stand up for your country. When it's maligned by CNN or the New York Times, you write to editors, you send emails, you meet the journalists who are speaking untruth. So this is what I have done, and this is what I wish that Indians, especially NRIs in the US, would do more, fight. There's only a handful of people who are, once I gave a lecture in the Atlanta University, I think they were on Indian history. I think there were about 2,000 Indian students in the Atlanta University. 9 turned up for my lecture. I don't do the lecture for me. I don't do it for money. I do it for free. But it makes me sad to see that among the tens and tens, 100,000 Indian students in the US, they have so little interest in their own country, in their own history, their own psyche. It's just about being in the US.
Yeah, I can empathize with you.
Has problems of divorce, of violence, of depression, and there's the country in India where people know pranayama, they know meditation, they know all these tools, and these guys just go to the US and they don't bring any Indianness. The thing is that if you're Indian, you radiate something, you radiate some Indianness wherever you go. Okay, the US has adopted you, you give back to the US because it's also a wonderful country of freedom, of opportunity. You give back, but you keep some Indianness, and then this is also your contribution to the US, like you do. Yes. That you have some Indianness and you contribute to your adopted country. You give some of that, but it's not happening, unfortunately, or very, very few people. So it's a long battle.
Yes.
I fear it's a long battle.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we're with you, and we're with FACT on the. We're supporting that. We really want you, everybody, to kind of work with you and see how your museum, your upcoming book, can be supported. But again, I don't want to keep it too long. Naturally speaking, we can go on and on, but I want everybody to hear more from you on this coming weekend, December 12th and 13th. Once again, the two timings are as follows. On December 12th, we have the event from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on December 13th, it's at 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And again, you can register at tiny.cc/talk by Francois Gautier. And Francois G, it's been a true pleasure. Looking forward to seeing the book and reading it myself, and all the best with everything.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.